Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden, and a very warm welcome to MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival, the big catch-up over the past few weeks. The MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival has delivered a wide collection of digital episodes, networking opportunities, and an in-person event right here in central London. We've heard from an incredible lineup of speakers sharing insights on everything from open banking to payment innovation and CX excellence. And today, we'll be streaming all of the highlights from the big meetup that took place on the 17th of November. Whether you're a part of our global audience tuning in for the first time, maybe you're catching content from a stream you couldn't catch up on the day, or if you're rewatching the best bits, it's great to have you with us, and you're in for a treat. Before we jump into a packed day of content, let's quickly do some housekeeping. You're watching us on Grip, your online event platform, where content and networking happen side by side. This is the final opportunity to connect. You can do that all from this website. Check all attendees and see who's with us. You can show interest if you'd like to reach out to them or book a meeting to chat face-to-face. You can have a look at who's interested in you also, and why not turn a connection into a meeting? Then there's your recommendations. Here you can check out the best matches for you. Grip is AI-powered, so it does quite a lot of that hard work for you. On meetings, don't forget to check who's requested a meeting with you at the notification center in the top right corner or on your personal schedule. Now, we've also scheduled a speed networking session happening at midday. It's a great opportunity to build new connections and continue the conversation into 2022. Last but not least, find out more about our sponsors by visiting their hubs from the homepage. Look, a huge thank you to our wonderful sponsors who make this event and many more possible. And that's all from me. It's been an absolute delight sharing these insights with you over the last few weeks. We look forward to seeing you at another event very soon. On to the part we've all been waiting for. In a second, we will have Chris Pitt, who is the CEO of First Direct, talking about creating digital experiences for all. We'll do that in a second. And we have wonderful speakers all through our sessions today in Studio 2. Okay, before we meet Chris, let's meet our pundit for the session, the wonderful Peter Neufeld from EY Seren. Peter, you aren't here. You are remote somewhere in the standard Zoom style. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm doing well. Coming to you live from West London, Chiswick. Really excited to be here. Really excited to hear the speakers today and participate in the discussion. And really sorry I can't be there in person.
Well, we can hear you loud and clear. Great to have you with us. Well, first of all, what are you kind of looking forward to from MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival today?
Well, I think it's been an interesting period for UK banking coming out of the pandemic. We've had 2 years of pulsing lockdowns. We've seen a radical change in consumer behavior and adoption of virtual and digital ways of engaging their financial life. I think we're seeing a renewed momentum in digital transformation across the sector. So hearing from Chris, talking about, the vulnerable customer, the full spectrum, getting a chance to hear from one of the first fintech challenger banks in the UK, then moving on to hearing from Monzo and smart communications on that sort of automation journey. And I'm really excited to hear also about that invisible interface and the Bank of Ireland and Cara from HSBC to kind of dig a bit deeper into how are we making this work across all the channels? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity to serve customers better and engage in financial well-being. There's a lot of great technology to support it. I think the real trick for us over the next 2 years is how to prioritize that in the right way and make sure that we're being human-centered in our approach.
Yeah. Very good. And just one quick question to you about the advances in digital CX and the technologies around it that you think have come through during the pandemic. Just get us started on that. What's changed? What is positive about where we are at the moment, do you feel, Peter?
Well, I think one thing that's really positive is more people than ever before are using digital and virtual channels to get access to services. And I think that just makes it more convenient. And the data that's being created around those interactions can be used and applied to make those experiences even more meaningful for customers, help them make better choices and decisions, and help them get better access to services. And that's both for very young people to those who are in retirement age. It's getting them more connected. I think at the same time, we need to double down our efforts in helping customers avoid being the victims of fraud. As these sort of channels become more ubiquitous and more of a standard, we're seeing lots of activity where individuals are being preyed upon and taken advantage of because of their level of maturity using the tools and services. So I think there's a great opportunity there. But I think over the next year or two, we've really got to put extra effort in, I think, in helping customers become aware of how to be safe using these new tools. But I think it's opening up accessibility for a wide part of the UK marketplace. And it's allowing us to have an economy that still functions when a significant part of the workforce, was held back in their homes for over a year.
Yeah, Peter, thanks very much. Got that loud and almost clear. Great to have you with us, and we'll see you again very, very shortly. Great to see you here on our screens. Okay, let's start with our first keynote of the session, and that is Chris Pitt, the CEO of First Direct. From Generation Z to vulnerable customers to silver surfers. Remember that phrase. How can every customer have access to the digital world? Let's find out. Chris, if you wouldn't mind joining us on stage.
We did some research groups as part of some purpose work that we're doing at FD. And what struck me is how hard the moderator had to work to get anybody to engage to financial services at all. I've been in this industry 30 odd years. It is so boring. And it has a toxicity in as much as it's boring, but important. And for a lot of people, it's confusing as well. And that toxicity plays out relative to this generation specifically. So trying to get them to engage at all before you have a conversation with about control and confidence is really, really hard thing to do. And I'm going to talk to each of those three things relative to what we're trying to do to tackle control, confidence, and the very nature of the dullness of our industry. Hence my desire to go to the after party, to be honest. The other context here is the unfairness, I think, that is implicit about when the young people of today were born. The idea that this generation are going to be poorer than their parents. It's quite interesting when you talk to them about that as a concept. Clearly, living their lives, they don't see that or understand it, but they are. And there's an inherent unfairness in that. And it really plays out in a very visceral way around home buying. I bought my first house, and I'm not wealthy. I don't come from a wealthy family, but when I was 23, because it was based around my income, a multiplier of my income. Now it's based around wealth. And if you don't have that wealth, you can't get onto the housing ladder. And I think it's a very compelling thing that financial services industries provide mortgages, but the idea to be independent and have a home of your own. It's very interesting for me to see that people who have come back into my business, first of all, are all the young people. All the young people who work in my company have come in because they haven't got a place to work from home. They're sitting on the end of a bed in a rented house or with their parents. And the pandemic has reinforced this sense of unfairness. And the other overlay is the squiggly lives that these people lead. Again, non-linear. I think the research suggests that these younger people will have at least 12 jobs in the course of their lives. They'll have periods without roles. So there's a real issue that these guys are facing into. And what we want to do is to help them and support them and give them hope as they kind of challenge some of the unfairness which is implicit in this context, really. So this is a picture from within our building in Sturton, a kind of a shed just outside of Leeds, if anybody's from West Yorkshire. Now this, I've used this chart because this talks to why FD has a part to play in tackling this. We're 32 years old. We were set up by the Midland Bank many, many years ago to be a 5% market share organisation. We've never, ever achieved that. So the desirousness here is to use talking to and engaging to young customers to scale our company. Now, why I talk to this chart is because when we were set up, we were a bit of a three-legged donkey as a financial services company. We didn't have any branches where most people did their banking. So we had to be absolutely brilliant at customer service. And you see that in the awards that FD has won, and we continue to rank very well for customer service. Now, the reason that we had to be brilliant at customer service is because that was the way that we attracted customers. And we famously do not employ people who are of the FS industry to engage to our customers. We want people who can empathize, who are extroverted, and have a conversation with our customers. And that humanity is something that we want to take on. Why I think we'll win as well, and this is in no disrespect to any other banks, and clearly we're a part of the HSBC organisation, but traditional banks are not connecting with these younger customers. Again, the conversations that you have, and I've been in this industry 30 odd years, is much a rear view mirror dynamic. You know, banking is for wealthy people, for people with money, rather than the people who are trying to get money. That's how they perceive it. And I think credit risk is one of the best examples of that. Credit risk is always a rear view mirror. You're not going to lend to these people because people who look like them before didn't do this. It doesn't really talk to the future, to the modernity, and the world in which these guys are living. And then the fintechs, and again, I've got a massive respect for the fintechs, and I understand with Monzo are going to talk after me. I think they've really set a challenge to the industry, but they're a bit about managing fast money. None of them have successfully gone on to the slow money for the longer term needs of people. Not just in product terms, but in terms of how they live their lives. Now, 97% of the transactions of FD are digital. 60% of my customers didn't call me up in the first half of this year. 83% of them called me less than twice. So we not only have a humanity at the heart of our company, but we also are a digitized organization. Again, that's why we think that we can really engage to these customers around what matters to them. You know, for the very simple, the fast transactions, you can be there for them. But when it gets complicated, confusing, or they want greater control, or they want to check in, we have that humanity as well. And again, very famously, we have none of this press 1, press 2 sort of tosh. If you want to talk to someone, you ring up FD, and we will talk directly to you. And very famously, in 9/11, an FD customer who knew they wanted to speak to a friendly human voice rang First Direct. Because they knew that they couldn't get through to their loved ones, but they knew FD would pick up the phone and talk to them in a very empathetic way. I told you my charts were good. So this is Derek. He's our zebra in our offices in Sturton. And now I'm going to just talk to the kind of the things that we're doing to tackle that kind of the inertia, the boredom, the greater need for control, and building confidence for customers. I mean, it's pretty hard to tackle boredom. But I think the very things that the fintechs have challenged the industry to do in some ways talk to that. They've made it very, very simple. You can now open a First Direct current account on your mobile phone in 10 minutes. You can go from applying to downloading your app into your digital wallet. Clearly, the chat bots, the mobile chat, the younger customers do not want to talk to us. And there's a real, and again, to the point that was made before, there's a real change that happened over the last 2 to 3 years, reinforced by the pandemic. We've seen a 30% reduction in the calls into our operation over the last 2 years, as we've put on 200,000 customers. Much, much lower engagement rate through the phone. People want to tackle it through digital, and they want to use chatbots and mobile chat. But the extension on from application, and I talked about a 10-minute application, is something we call progressive, which is about you just register with us as a company. You goal seek rather than apply. So you make the step into financial services, into working with First Direct very, very low. You basically register with us, and then we will engage to you rather than you having to give us your information. And you will come on and you will goal seek. And I think it's very interesting that the insight tools that us and other fintechs now provide are one of the ways that people log in most of all. I know that my morning ritual is to have a cup of coffee and then look to see how much money my wife has given to my children over the course of the last 24 hours by looking at my bank account. And that's what you want to do. You've got to give people insights rather than actually talk to them about products. In terms of control, I think there's a real metamorphosis that's going to happen in our industry. To be honest, I don't know about you, but I'm not in the least bit interested how many contactless payments I made yesterday or whether I used Uber 10 times. I couldn't give a monkey's. You've got to give insights rather than facts. And that I think is going to be the next generation. It's not just where and what. And within our company, we enriched over 500 million transactions in the course of the last 3 months. So that enrichment of transactions with other data is happening all the time. But what does it then mean for you? So again, lots of companies do this, so I'm not claiming that we're the only ones, but balance after bill. So if that customer that I referenced at the beginning is going to spend some money, is it going to take them overdrawn at the end of the month? So giving them some insight before they actually make that transaction. Prompts to pay bills is a very sensible thing, bless you, for younger customers. To stop them getting charged or to missing out on that bill payment, and to use data relative to other customers who look like them to give them insights. And deliver through in-app messaging. You're there at that moment for them. So we famously have never been a company that is sold to our customers. You're actually just giving them information so they can choose themselves. And then finally, confidence. How do you build that confidence from fast money into slow money? The managing their money so that they go down the pub or they go to a bar or they're spending on their holiday, into thinking about that relative to the goals that they want for the future. And it isn't about product sales. So a day-to-day financial fitness tracker. And again, not something that says don't eat that sandwich or eat that cake. Something that is with them and for them. Observations on where they're spending relative to their financial health. So behavioral economics and bringing that to bear. Rewarding goal delivery. So if you set up a goal to build some monies to be able to invest in a home, actually give bonus interest rates if you achieve it. So you're actually connecting with people in that way through the product. And clearly something which is being done but needs to be continued to be done is building credit. The credit builder. And again, I think that really talks to the idea that banking is boring. Is if you talk to how to build your credit, you're not in the least bit interested. If you talk to the fact that you can get out from under the feet of your mum and dad, if you do this, you're talking to them out of what matters to them rather than the things that we want to impose upon them or the functional dynamic of our industry. So hopefully, crackly at first and much better in the second half. I've given you an insight into what matters to younger customers, and by that very nature, a lot of customers. YFD, I think, is very well positioned to take advantage and talk to those people, support them. And then some of the things that we are doing, and we want to do, and we will be doing over the course of the next couple of years to deliver for them. So thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Chris. Just join us for a couple of minutes. We've got Peter, and it's Derek, right? Derek the zebra?
Derek, absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
And Derek's a very important part of the workforce, I understand.
He's the most articulate member.
Right, okay. Always looking at the the mission. Okay, Peter Neufeld from EY Seren is with us elsewhere. Peter, are you with us? Can you hear us?
I am. I can hear you.
Great. What did you take away, first of all, from Chris? And please be nice.
Well, Chris, it was great to see you. And I couldn't agree more that the real challenge in the future for this younger generation is going to be, how do we shift that confidence from the fast money to the slow money dynamic? And I thought it was also really powerful to think about really shifting the narrative of how we provide financial services, that kind of goal-seeking, progressive view. The other thing that I thought maybe presents a challenge to us as a sector is your articulation of how home buying has gone from something that's related to our income to becoming almost a wealth management product. And I think there's a lot in that I think we need to examine as a culture in terms of the primary focus of a lot of people feeling as that being a big marker of their success. I thought that was really, really brilliant. And I'm wondering, as you look at that, emerging slow money in confidence and returning control, what are some of the programs or initiatives you're excited about in the coming years?
Yeah, what do you think, Chris?
The thing that really most excites me is the progressive idea. The idea that you're not even engaging to these people around financial services at all. You're engaging them to around their lives and how they can better manage their lives. I think if you said to these younger guys that you could get out from under your parents, so you could actually have that degree of independence, you talk to them relative to what matters to them in their lives rather than the product or the construct. And you do that and you introduce the idea of credit building or interest rates or how conveyancing works as a function of them trying to achieve something, rather than selling them the functional. We engaged all FD people over the course of the last quarter of the year, and one of my guys said to me, we should educate customers. Absolutely, but I said, but they're not in the least bit interested about being educated. They're interested in what they want to do in their lives.
Yeah, and I wonder, you mentioned that you've given that added value to 2 million interactions in the last 3 months. Genuinely, was it valued? Did these young people, and I wish I felt like a young person enough to take that away myself, but was it value that that can build loyalty?
Yeah, it's 500 million actually.
500,
sorry, no worries. We see that in our data, and to be honest, we also see that in the people who leave FD, because if you don't deliver to that, absolutely they're going to walk away, because there are options, and so and because they've got the attention span of a gnat, you really do need to engage to them about something that is of value to them and that is practicable.
Yeah.
If you said to my lad, you could buy some more skater gear if you actually manage this money a bit better, he would be with you,
right,
rather than telling him off for spending some money which looked completely spurious.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely the kind of the tone as well as the functionality.
Yeah, which First Direct has done for, well, the whole time, which we know about. Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks very much, Peter, for being with us. Peter will be back with us throughout. Chris, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, a very warm welcome to Rona Ruthen. Hello, good to see you. And
Hello.
to Neil Greathead, great to have you with us. We've met before, so it's nice to see you here in the real world.
Good to be here.
We're here to talk about optimizing self-service automation. Lots to talk about. The main drivers, to design challenges, lots more as well. So first of all, Rona, great to have you with us. Just tell us who you are and what you do.
Hello, great to be here. Rona Ruthen, I'm VP of Customer Experience at Monzo Bank. Hopefully you all know Monzo, hot coral cards and all that. We're only 6 years old, not as old as other participants. And we're on a mission to make money work for everyone. So we're very passionate about making money less stressful and to make more people be in control over the money. And it's nice that that is shared with other banks these days.
There'll be a lot of coral cards in this room, I'm sure. Great to have you with us, Rona. And then Neil Greathead from Smart Communications. Neil, just tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name's Neil. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Smart Communications. And kind of tying into what Chris said, so what we do is we help customers in highly regulated industries like finance, insurance, healthcare, drive conversations with customers, so two-way conversations, interactive and personal solutions. And it's great to be here, face-to-face.
Thank you very much for being here. Great to have them both with us. Okay, well, let's start off with Rona first of all. What is making self-service automation such a hot topic at the moment for you?
Two key drivers, and I'll start with a less interesting one, and that's about cost. We all know that any business, including financial services, we need to make sure that we control our costs, that we drive them down, and we do that by reducing the need for human contact. Yeah. And it goes hand in hand and with no conflict with the second driver, which is all about the customer experience and making sure that it's effortless, it's intuitive, it's easy, and it's self-service, right? The whole point is making it easy for customers to solve problems for themselves so they don't have to wait online and they don't have to wait for a phone call just to do something that they can do themselves. So, for example, if I want to change my details, my email address or my address, I don't want to call anyone. I don't want to wait on the line. I don't even want to wait on a chat. I just want to be able to do it myself when I'm waiting for the bus or when I'm watching television. And it should be simple, straightforward.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Neil, does that sound about right to you as well? Obviously, we've come through a pandemic, hopefully come through a pandemic. That's moved things along as well. But what do you think in terms of the timeliness of self-service?
Yeah, I don't think it's a new topic. I think definitely it's been accelerated in the last 18 months, but it's always been, we've kind of digital transformation, it's always been something that we've been trying to strive towards. Yeah. I think some interesting stats around this. BAI did some research recently saying 24% of banking consumers have started to use more digital channels, so usage is more. And I think what's more interesting is that 15% of banking consumers have used digital channels in the last 18 months for the very first time. Right. I think that puts pressure in the system that we've spoke about, and it could be in a number of things. But we're definitely seeing that with our customers, and just like, how do we, going back to what Chris said earlier, is like, how do we help our customers and engage with them to do simple tasks easily?
And the nature of engagement when you're a first-timer on a new digital channel, I guess, it can be more labor-intensive for you as an organisation. But I wonder what new advances you're interested in, which in terms of, in terms of self-service, but around those as well, that you think have really come through as good contenders.
I think the best self-service experiences are ones that are so embedded in the product experience that you don't even think of them as service. Right. Companies like Amazon, Deliveroo, Uber do that very well. If you think about Deliveroo, you would never think about calling someone and asking, where's my food, right? It's so embedded in the product. You can see the location. You know that you'll get notifications about where the rider is, what their name is, what they're up to, and what time your food what time your food would arrive. And we should expect the same for other experiences. And that builds trust over time as well. At this point, I don't know how many of you order Deliveroo, but you also know that if something goes wrong, they'll let you know. Yeah. And that's the kind of trust that we want to build over time. I see that in some of the things that we're building at Monzo, obviously biased, but I'm still going to say it. The ability to freeze and unfreeze your card. It seems so basic now, but it wasn't 2, 3, 4 years ago. And it's nice that so many of the other banks are building similar things now, because that's what customers are growing to expect. I want to be in control of doing that if I lose my card or I misplace it. And most of our experiences with banks and other companies should be the same.
Even though the people at home may not see it, I'd like to know from a show of hands, who thinks they've really licked the situation with self-service? Who thinks they have, left hand? Who thinks they've got serious fundamental issues and still haven't got their right hand? Left hand versus right hand. Who's got it right? Right hands, right hands, right hands. Any left hands? Right hands. Any left hands going up? I can't see. Oh, I saw one left hand. Yes. I can't see your face, but I can see the person. So one, but it's a great minority.
What was left and right again?
Left is we've got it sorted. Right, we don't have it sorted yet. And that's quite interesting. So there's a long way.
We need another chair for the left-handed person to come up.
We do indeed. But thanks for the left hand over there. I can see you over there. Thank you very much. So, a long way to go. And I wonder, Neil, in terms of, the practicalities, what do you need to get in there and get right when you're designing autonomous journeys? What are the key factors?
We've only got 15 minutes left.
Yes.
Right? So, I think the starting point should be that kind of aspiration of, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, it's like removing friction. Yeah. Because regardless of whether you are well averse into the technology or not, when you're engaging, you're trying to complete a task or do something. And if there's friction in that, it just drives frustration. So that should be the ultimate goal. I think a lot of positive things come out, like you said, like there's a cost element of saving that you can have. But ultimately, if we're looking at enhancing the customer experience, we need to remove friction. I think there's a few areas I would say that we see our customers really focusing on. One is orchestration. So really thinking about how do you manage the interaction across multiple channels. Am I able to start a transaction on my mobile, at the bus stop, get back home, have tea, log back on to the website and start exactly where I left off, and it's seamless. So really think about the kind of like the omni-channel approach. I think AI is another area where we really need to be thinking. We're seeing a lot of our customers think in that area, especially about vulnerability. Like there are tools and data out there that we can absolutely use to help our customers and guide them with good information. I think Marketforce did some research a year or so ago, And it's really interesting because around vulnerability, and they were saying that 84% of kind of financial advisors were really going to be focusing on vulnerability, identifying, trying to help make good decisions. But only 12% of them felt like they had the right tools, which is, I mean, that's a big gap. And then the third one for me, when you think about the kind of customer journey, and this is, I get quite emotional about this one. And this This is forms, like static PDF forms that you ask customers to fill in all the time. Yeah. And so my experience on this is, and it's not in finance, but I think it's the same everywhere. So my car rescue service, they emailed me and said, my renewal is up, you've got this car, this car, this car, these family members, do you want to renew, hit yes or no? I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, hit yes. It sent me to a form to fill everything in again.
Ooh, ouch.
I'm like, hang on a minute, you know me, you know all this stuff. But here's the interesting thing.
Did you switch providers?
I did.
Good.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing, is that I know how difficult it is to pull all this together, yet I'm still frustrated by it, because actually, in my social life, in all the other apps that I can do, it's really easy.
Yeah.
So there's a perception thing we need to be really careful about here.
And the thing is, with friends, you will forget certain things, but you have a license in order to get that information out of somebody. So that trust, that extra layer of friendship hasn't been reached, and that's a fundamental failing. Rona, any other thoughts in terms of those key elements?
Yeah, I think it's about understanding the job to be done from the customer perspective, what we're trying to solve for the customer, and then really looking at the end-to-end journey. We're applying that now at Monzo in our disputes process, and even calling it disputes is something really interesting, because when you start looking at the process, you realize customers don't really think about it in the term of what is a dispute. They think, I see a transaction in my account that I don't recognize, did someone steal my money? Or they think, I bought a product and I didn't receive it, and the merchant won't pay me back. Yeah. And so the way they message us and the way that they want to interact with us in these experiences where it could be stressful, they're out of pocket, they don't know what's going to happen next, it could be a quite long and complicated interaction. Looking at that, understanding what the customer needs, understanding the emotional impact of that, and then solving for the end-to-end journey all the way to you get your money back and you trust that we as a bank have your back. Yeah. That's what we're trying to solve for. So really looking at the whole scope of that and understanding it from a customer perspective.
Sounds really easy, doesn't it?
It's really not.
Why has it taken this long? Yeah. What about inclusivity involving every type of customer along the journey? Neil?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because I think corporations can start off with the kind of goal of we want to make sure we understand every single customer, every single customer's need. But if you kind of look at it now, we're probably managing and servicing 5 generations of customers, all have different needs, have different backgrounds. I mean, to Chris's point earlier, there's education levels, there's ability and understanding, there's even like general access. Like there's some families you'll have 1 laptop per family, right? So, and I think trying to go small and not run too quick, like think big, but don't run too quick. And trying to understand your customer base, like we see a lot of customers and we help customers do customer segmentation. So really kind of, what are the groups of customers? What are they trying to do? What are those transactions that digitally you can go, we can do this kind of really quick, we can put a bow around it, and it's really easy, and that deals with 60% of customers. That's a great win. And then as it gets more complicated, that's, I think, when I'm not too sure you can get to a point where the self-service and fully automation is even where we need to be in finance. I mean, Chris was talking about it earlier. It's like, we still need, it's a people business. Yeah. And even if the transaction's easy, sometimes individuals just want to know, is this the right decision for me? I can push a button and make it happen.
Well, this is something that I butt up against in the communication side is it's, yes, we're all trying to understand what the customers want, but do the customers really understand what you're offering, and there can be a bit of a disjoint there. First Direct, I think the customers know what you're offering, and that's why they've taken a lot more customers. I think people like Starling, they know what you're getting. And Monzo the same. The number of Coral cards that I've seen in meetings and so on is amazing. So people understand and they associate and they say, that's the right set for me. even when you're not really engaged. So I suppose that's part of it, understanding what your bank is offering to you, what your financial services provider is doing. Back onto things like the technology side, Rona, NLP, natural language processing, all those different really fascinating tools and sentiment analysis. How can they help with self-service?
Well, exactly that. Helping us to identify when something is going wrong. That's very important for us, right? Self-service can be great. I actually think it can go very, very far in terms of solving problems, but we really do need to understand when we need that human, empathetic service and when to apply it. And that doesn't mean that it's different between different processes, but we need to know when to pull people out of a certain experience and then cater to their needs. And that could be a specific vulnerability or just being really stressed about something. We mentioned home buying, which is a very stressful experience in and of itself. There's multiple stages to that. A lot of that could be automated as part of the experience, but there are points in time where, exactly to your point, sometimes you just want to speak to someone. So connecting all those dots, when do you need the human service, how to identify when to pull people out of an automated process and direct them in a different way, multi-channel experience, connecting all of these things, that's where we actually take these experiences to the next level.
Yeah, I'm sure for our audience here, you've all got your own experiences. Also, people watching us here at home, you'll only have your own thoughts. I'd love to pull on our guest here who said they've got it all sorted. I just drag her on and just have a listen to her. But it's fascinating. I wonder, Neil, from your point of view, what do you think in terms of end-to-end processes, getting that design right, and where the human agent and the technology mix? How do you make that journey a bit more smooth, a bit more connected, so that you know when the humans have to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it really.
Yeah.
I think if you go in with we're going to make it fully automated, you're probably not going to be successful because you can absolutely get to a point, and you can have intelligent humans in there as well. But there are still portions of the kind of let's call it the community that will still want to. I see all the tick boxes. I just need to make sure. I need a level of reassurance, and it doesn't mean that it's trying to understand in that process, as Rona, when you say, like, when do you engage and when do you come out of that? How do you use the data, like build data and analytics into your processes, into your data gathering? Yeah. And there are profiles, and you can see trends coming out, and you can go, this group of people, we know we need to help them along the process, even if it's hey, I'm here for you, do you need anything? So I think it's just bringing and dovetailing that in nicely together, as opposed to we're just going to try and solve everything with automation.
Yeah, I wonder whether your human agents also need to, if a call is spat out to you wherever you are in the business, and then you've got a sort of happy smiles, time to be the human that they all want me to be. That's quite difficult to do as well. So I guess you need to internally also work with your people so that there is some way of them smoothly jumping in and giving the right help, even if it is, as Neil says, hey, I see you've got a bit of a problem. What can I do for you?
And it's actually getting harder, because the more experiences we automate, the things that are actually left for the people who work for us in our teams are more complex, more sensitive, require more nuanced decision-making, higher level of empathy. So that's also becoming more complicated and something for us to solve for.
Yeah. And Neil, again, that same point really, to help organizations for the people to understand the value of their role, I guess. That's going to be very important going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, it's critical. I think especially in finance, in the last 18 months in the finance industry, I think what's been interesting is there's been aspirations to kind of move forward in the digital transformation. It's a great kind of management buzzword that we use, and marketers use it. But we're all trying to move forward in the same direction. But definitely over the last 18 months, it's been accelerated. But what I find really interesting is the kind of consumers, the users, our customers are really driving the expectations based on what they do in their day-to-day life. And going back to what Chris was saying earlier, it's like kind of banking is kind of banking, right? It's kind of like it is what it is. But I can do all this kind of nice stuff really easy over here. My expectation is I do this exactly over here. And it's not only a systems thing, but it's a people thing. Yeah, there's a culture element within this as well that I think we just need to kind of understand. This is how we used to be. Like Friday, it was like this. Monday, it's looking quite different. And it's really difficult. It's difficult if you've got 32 years of legacy that Chris has, as opposed to coming in and having 6 months, or you're coming in because you can go clean slate. But when you've got legacy systems, you've got data all over the place, you've got 15 different systems that don't talk to each other. It is difficult.
Absolutely. And I heard Chris use the words automated answering tosh. The word tosh with you, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah.
But
I had to look that up.
No, it's a good one, though. I love to hear that. But Rona, just a final thing, really, in terms of looking forward. Can we define what the next level of self-service in banking is? What is it, and how can we get there?
Great question.
I apologise.
No, it's okay. Like I said, I think the best self-service experiences are the ones that you don't think of as service.
Yeah.
They're just embedded in the product. It's something that you need to get done, and it's intuitive, it's easy, it's there. You don't have to look for it. Your sort of the education happens in the app itself, in the experience of the product. And I think the next stage is having that more personalized and actually pushed to you at the right time, so you don't even have to look for it or ask for it. We can anticipate when someone might want to buy a house and then help them through the entire process of getting your bank statements, getting ready to speak to your broker, and all the things that you need to do, all the way to that very stressful money transfer, which might be the biggest one you ever make in your life. So really sort of being a companion to customers through that flow and helping them not just in being there, but actually nudging them through the process in the right way.
That sounds right. Neil, that sounds right as well, doesn't it? And also just, you mentioned reassurance earlier on, so just being reassuring enough for us all as customers to be able to go to the next step.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of common language. I think you mentioned it earlier. It's about the dispute. Like, we recognise it as a dispute, and it's a process. Someone's at the end of an email, the phone, whatever it may be, just going, "I've just got a problem. Like I don't understand this." So I think there's an element of, yes, we can kind of do all this good stuff, but we've got to start talking the same language.
Yeah.
And then it becomes real, to what Chris was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And then that's when you start you're not communicating, that's when you're having a conversation. A conversation is two-way by default, and that's what we're striving to get towards. It's not a one-way, here's some data for you. It's like, no, a conversation is meaningful, and it has an interaction, and it has an endpoint.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much indeed. Stay with us. Thanks to Rona, thanks to Neil for your time with us. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to Peter in a second. And here's Peter. Hello, Peter. What did you take away from Neil and Rona's points? Rona, they're still here with us, so by all means, be nice.
Yeah, no, hi, everyone. I thought that, well, it's a two-way street, isn't it? And we need to start thinking about customers as real, robust, dynamic human beings. I really like that idea of, moving away from thinking about the process of customer service and start thinking about the dynamic, embedded, intuitive human aspect of it. And I think there's something in there about separating out the failure demand, where customers are trying to solve a problem and we're confusing them because our experience isn't simple, or we've created a complex way to manage a particular issue, versus shift and how we eliminate that failure demand, how we address it in that servicing experience, to then shifting to what you were talking about there right at the end, which is the value demand. How can I start to understand how I can help someone on that home buying journey, on their day-to-day financial management to achieve that goal? And I think that's where this idea of the experience of the product having the service embedded in it, and also that notion of service, what it means for a product to serve a need. And I think that kind of mindset shift and that kind of ethical shift in how we think about banking and experience can be really profound. But I thought that was really fascinating.
I'm going to throw it just to the guys here for a second. Failure demand, Rona, that's a very big thing. It's inefficient. It's also not great for your reputation, all that sort of good stuff. And Peter mentioned it there. How do you start to reduce that? Also reduce the onerous nature of failure demand, because it's a problem.
We think of it as a zero-defect approach to product development, essentially. We want to make sure that every feature, every product that we build, we take into account what the full experience should be, and that there's less need to get in touch with us. And if you do have a need, it's more about something that you need to do or something that needs to change, rather than we didn't make it easy for you, we didn't make it clear for you, we didn't make it available for you. And so getting rid of failure is by design what we want to do. And then the next level is through the things that you want to do and that we want to help you to do, how do we make that efficient and how do we make that effortless?
Yeah, so Neil, the optimization is extremely useful.
Yeah, and I think, and this isn't just a kind of finance industry issue, right? So this is kind of like, I was going to say basic, it's not basic, but it's a fundamental element of continuous improvement. So it's great to put new offerings, services out, wrappers, however we want to kind of define it in language that we use. We need to build in the ability to kind of do two things really. One, get feedback. And the most important thing is do something with that feedback. Don't just gather it and then do nothing, because then nothing changes. So I think they're the key things.
Peter, back to you for a second. In terms of, we talked about trying to build a really end-to-end process where people are included. Also, it works throughout, using digital, using human touch. What do you think about that and the importance of the human touch, Peter?
Well, I think it's hugely critical. And I think something was just said there about how we manage feedback. I think we spend a lot of time thinking about the design and engineering process that banks use to design and deliver and optimize and improve products and services. And I think the degree to which you're able to bring real customers into that process, whether that's to understand their needs as you start shaping nuances and features of a particular product or service, down to how agile engineering teams might take customer insight and research and co-creation to groom the backlog of user stories they're going to implement, and how we feed that insight back into those teams that are doing continuous delivery. And I think when you get to that optimal point where you're constantly improving with a real engagement with customers, and you're using that kind of empathy, you start bridging the gap. If you start bridging the gap between that slow and fast money issue we heard about earlier. But certainly I think you start shifting from a process-oriented lens to a very kind of responsive and outcome-oriented lens about how do you help your customers make better financial choices, and how do you help those decisions have real positive impact, and how do you string those decisions together so they can reach a bigger goal, which I think is what we're all trying to do in banking now, right? We're trying to drive that purpose through. We're trying to build something with the technology available to us that can really drive a better outcome for everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Peter. We'll see you again very shortly, a bit later on. And thanks to Neil. Thanks to Rona for being with us. Wonderful. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. You're watching MoneyLIVE Autumn Festival. Welcome back, and it's time for our first panel discussion of the session, where we're talking about one size does not fit all. Refining channel strategies. Great to have you with us. We'll be looking at Optichannel strategies, the role of automation in channel strategies, also where the human meets the digital. We'll continue with that theme. First of all, let's meet our wonderful panel. Great to have you all with us in the studio today. Cara Richards. Hello, Cara. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Cara, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Cara Richards. I look after the customer experience for the wholesale bank. And what we do is we really focus on bringing customers into the bank so that we can design and deliver solutions that really meet their needs and have a real empathetic understanding for what we can do that's going to add value for them. And we have a team of Rockstars with us that will hopefully ask some good questions about it.
I saw a Rockstar out there with a very good shirt.
He's one of ours.
In shame. Great to have you with us, Cara. Thank you very much for the Rockstars to be here as well. Mark Kelly, how are you, Mark?
Good, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Mark Kelly is my name. I'm head of digital channels at Bank of Ireland, which is everything from the public website, mobile app, consumer business digital, and even branch kiosks in that family. But I also lead the digital analytics and personalization team that build and deploy those technologies, I suppose, across the estate and own the sales and service optimization plan.
Great to have you here, Mark. With us. Nice to see you here. And sadly, Mercedes Clark-Smith can't join us for this session, but all the best wherever you may be. Michael Fullalove is our final guest on our panel. Just tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Mike Fullalove, and I'm SVP of Strategy and Business Development at Fintech OS, the logo that you saw on the screen earlier. So Fintech OS is a technology company, and we provide high productivity fintech architecture. Now, what does that mean? That means we provide end-to-end journeys for banks, insurance companies, and more actually non-financial services companies. So everything from the digital customer layer into the defining the product, the way you want to define the product, administering the product and booking it. So the end-to-end journey and the solutions that banks and insurance companies need.
Thanks very much, Mike, for being there. I will not call you Michael from now on. Mike it is. We're friends. Cara, first kick us off, if you wouldn't mind. What do you think a really good Optichannel strategy in 2021 and going into 2022 should look like?
It's a really great question. And actually, when I first heard about Optichannel strategies, I was like, oh, great, here's another buzz term, right? But when I learned about it, it's really important for us to think about Optichannel strategies, because what it means is that we're really using the customer preferences and the data that we have to make sure that we're surfacing channels to customers in the most relevant way for them to complete the action that they have. And so if you think about it, it's really uber personalization within banking. And for us to be able to focus on an Optichannel strategy, it means we really need to be close to the customer and understand their needs and their priorities, and then use the data that we have in our company to be able to kind of shape the interactions with them. And when you look back on 2021, it was a really interesting time for us as in banking sectors. And you heard some other people talk about earlier, where we've really added a lot of additional channels into banking to try and meet customers in new ways. Banking as a service, Afterpay, Klarna. We added channels. We also saw the rise of banks that had 1 and 2 channels, and they found the customer segments that were really attracted to banking in that way. So we had additive channels, and we had 1 and 2 channel banks that were really coming up. But where I think we really need to start pushing the envelope and doing more is figuring out, how do you optimize the channels that we have to make sure that they're really focused on the customer? How do we make better use of the data? And I'm really keen to get Mark's thoughts on this in a second too, because this is where we can really do more with an Optichannel strategy. So when we look at 2022, what I think it means for us is really getting close to the customer and understanding the needs and the priorities that they have, and looking at AI and data and really sophisticated algorithms that can spot trends and patterns for us to know what should we really be doing for our customers in these different channels and giving them access to it. So, and if we do that, if we get close to the customer and use the data and the technology that we have and build on some of those foundations that a lot of the banks have exhibited, I think we can really start to change the way that banks engage with customers and become much more competitive in this marketplace.
So, Mark, I'll throw it to you in a second, but first we'll go to Mike as well and get your thoughts on that. What do you think the key elements are? Clearly, that's a really good summation of it and being really close. You can't form an Optichannel strategy unless you are already thinking about customers first. Is that true, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think before people started using the term Opti, they used Omnichannel. That was the term that was used for the last few years. And you know, where did that really get to? And maybe that meant we have to take all of our products and we have to provide them to all of our customers through all the time in all channels. Now, that's very challenging for the organization to deliver. There's many reasons that's challenging. But more importantly, it's not what the customer wants. The customer doesn't want to look at all the channels all the time, and that's come out of over the last year, that it's really about the customer problem. What problem we're really trying to solve, and trying to deliver that solution in that channel. So it's about giving the right solution at the right time in the right channel. So that's where it's moved away from Omni to Opti. And I think on one hand, you might be comfortable making a payment on your mobile, which is totally digital. You're not speaking to a person. If you're then thinking about investments, there's more advice and understanding needed. So a hybrid model might work. You might want to do the onboarding and a number of parts digitally, but then you probably need to speak to someone to make sure that you've understood everything and it's okay, and there's this complexity that you don't understand. But then sort of the extreme case is when you have to notify the bank or insurance company of a death in the family. It's a very difficult time. At that point, you probably want to do that in person. And it might not be in a branch, but it might be on a phone.
Yeah.
So there you're thinking about customer needs, and you're thinking about delivering it in the right way to the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the principles are well known, Mark. Of course, we know what we have to do, but getting there is quite difficult. In fact, very difficult. And I guess the use of data, also the relationships you build through the use of data are very important. Kara's thrown the gauntlet down to you. How do we start to get there?
Yeah, well, look, I think first off, trusting measurement has been, for us, pivotal. The digital channel is quite fluid, it's growing. Where digital channel suite is kind of changing. So for us, that was foundational of understanding what's going on, what are customers actually doing in all these different channels, and what's our same customer doing, and how are they hopping between these different channels in any given week or month, or even within a journey, because it's something like a mortgage, it doesn't happen in a single day. So obviously, for that, you need a unique identifier, and we had painful experiences with getting analytics right and different, over the years. But I think we did get to a point where we had that unique identifier. That typically would be, if you're lucky, a customer ID or a hashed ID, and then as customers are going through even sites or AdWords or whatever, once they log in, you stitch that together and you start to build your profile. So that was really important for us. But it could be just a browser ID or even cookie-based type audiences. But I suppose that is pivotal to me. You cannot optimize a strategy or optimize your channel unless you really have that anchor point. I think that allows you to target the low-hanging fruit. So if you take, which is typically your own customers, in our own bank example, we've over 20 million visits to our channel every month. We know, I'm saying these are basics, but we know 90% of people are in our banking channel. We know that our customers log in 3 times more frequently into the mobile app than into the desktop. But we also know that a third of customers use both desktop and mobile in a month. So they're just insights to give you, and then we know the conversion. So for example, we know personal loans convert really well on a mobile device. That's good. We know the CES is good, but it's not like that for other products. So you can start to see using just basic principles that you'd use I used to work in Dell. You always used to use the corner shop analogy of it's the exact same. What's happening? What are people buying? What's the converting? And just using that good old first principle metrics. But if you don't have that data, you can't do it. So I suppose we have evolved to, once you have that ability to track and measure, you can start to build the audiences. And it doesn't have to be, madly sophisticated or, people talk about one-to-one marketing, but even basic things of breaking up your visitors into audiences at a very basic level. Are you a customer or not, or are you not? Or are you typically a mobile visitor or whatever it might be? You can then start to personalize your experience better. And crucially, you can test it and measure it, and have your funnels and conversion. What's converting well on the mobile? What's converting well? I mentioned kiosks earlier on. For some products, that's still actually important in our particular bank, but not for others. So that sort of idea is really important, I think. Yeah. And then that testing and A/B testing of what's converting and what's not. That's one thing coming into banking. I'm in it a long time, but even over 10 years ago in Dell, it was like massive focus on that. Teams just looking at conversion, where it's dropping off. And culturally, that's not really there in financial services that I see. There's not enough people focused on that. So lots of dashboards, lots of Google Analytics dashboards and stats and facts, but not sure there's as many teams driving it hands-on.
I mean, yes, it may be low-hanging fruits. A lot of low-hanging fruit, millions of low-hanging fruits involved. So it's a very, very complex data system that you have to have in place. But you have to understand exactly what that data means for your organization. Quick thing on engagement during the pandemic. And I wonder whether, Cara, that you feel that customers are more engaged or perhaps more active. Perhaps there's some way that there's more interaction going on because of COVID.
I think we have seen an increase in engagement. And I think especially at the start of the pandemic when from a wholesale perspective, a lot of our customers didn't know what this was going to mean for them and their businesses. And a lot of our businesses found themselves in really tough situations. So we had them reach out to us more because they wanted to talk about the options, and they didn't know what the options were going to be. So we really saw an increase in engagement, especially with human contact. Yeah. We also saw an increase, as you would expect, in the digital channels too. So we saw people using new channels that they hadn't previously engaged in before, as Neil said earlier. But when we're looking at that too, one of the other things that's interesting is you also find the segment of customers that aren't going to use digital. And as banks, we always try and think about how we drive self-serve and how we drive digital. And I think, to Rona's point earlier, so we can look at making sure that there's great capabilities for people to do things when they want, as they need it. But we also realize that digital's not going to be the solution for a set of customers. And we were able to identify those. Yeah. And so the engagement was really becoming much stronger, but it also gave us a lot of insight to the way that now people are going to start to engage with us differently in the future. And then also, how do we start to make sure that we're still taking care of that subset that have a very clear preference for the way that they want to work with us that might not match our own?
Yeah, briefly, Mark, yeah.
I think it helps as well, a lot of the metrics turned out to be better than you would have thought before if the same thing had happened. Like in our case, our complaints went down 20% year on year. The financial well-being scores went up. There was things, and crucially, we all have in our organizations things that you could never get over the line, or innovations that you couldn't bring forward. So that compressed all of that, and it pushed, even I know it's not digital per se, but remote contact center working just wasn't a feature in our bank. It is now. Yeah. So all of those things, it had its benefits out of necessity. I suppose it forced that innovation.
Yeah. Mike, we're inevitably going to think about this in sort of a human sense, but in terms of automation, where can automation come in, be deployed to improve customer experience? Where are we right now? It changes all the time. Every time we talk, it changes. But where do you think we are right now in going forward to deploy automation really successfully?
So we've already spoken about automation a number of times this morning, and what does automation mean? It can mean many things. Going and seeing a personalized website is automation. Yeah. Getting a chatbot, and a chatbot that helps you to get automation. Or on the other extreme, you could have an onboarding journey and everything down through the full stack, that everything is automated. They're all automation. They all add customer value. And but which one do you mean? And the key is data, because without data, you can't get the understanding of the customer. You can't understand where they are, where they want to be. So thinking about the data, if you were, banks now have better data because of contactless payments and open banking and the other sources via API. And once they've got a better insight into a customer, let's say you have a customer that has got a big vet bill. You think, well, how can I help that customer? There might be a personal loan. There might be pet insurance. There's a number of different ways, and you could automate that understanding. You could even automate a great onboarding journey, but if it looks slick and nice and it stops there, then automation has helped a bit, but it hasn't really helped, on solving their problem. And that's really what we try to do at Fintech OS, is really have the entire stack automated. So it's not just about the onboarding journey, is the product that you've defined for that customer. Could you administer it? Can you deliver that really automated journey and using the data? It's about, one, it's getting the data. It was mentioned earlier, there's data in many different places in bigger organizations. Can you get them in one place? Can you understand the data? Yeah. And then do you have the technology to enable you to personalize the products, automate the products, and deliver those?
Absolutely, and you said it again, it's reaching beyond what the data tells you immediately. It's absolutely at all times thinking about what that means to the customer, which means the next step and the next 5 steps rather than what it means to you. Briefly, Cara, the handover between bot or data and human, we've talked about it a bit today in our session already. What's important to get right there to link them together more successfully?
Well, I think chatbots have a really important role in what we do within banking. It really helps drive simplicity of banking day to day. And so when we look at that in the last few years too, we've seen a huge increase in the number of chats that we've had. I think Bank of America had a crazy stat where in 1 year they went from like 23 million interactions via chat to over 100 million. And so part of it, we force that interaction, and we're seeing the real increase in using that channel, but it's for simple things. So customers are really happy to use chat for simple things. When you start to run into more complex issues and you start to run into friction, still, customers want to speak to human. 50% of customers in the UK want to speak to human. So we have to think about that interaction where if something started in chat, how do we escalate into the human support at the right point in time? And that means making sure that we can transfer the contact and the chat history into that human conversation so you're not repeating yourself. The number one thing that upsets our customers is when they have to repeat themselves. And so we have to make sure that when we're thinking about that digital human interaction, how do we minimize the ability to repeat themselves and make sure that that next time when they're speaking to a human, that we're solving for their issue there. Because every time we hand over a problem or an issue, you see your NPS scores plummet because customers get really frustrated that they can't get their problem solved. And so we have to make sure that in the transfer, we give that information, that data to try and answer it as much as possible at the first point. The first point of contact.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's move on just for a few minutes to talk about engagement channels, new ones. Mark, first of all, to you, the likes of WhatsApp, messaging apps like WhatsApp, how credible are they to interact with humans? And bearing in mind that I have a phone right here, which will go off if we suddenly stop. No, we're fine. So, Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, they're definitely credible. They're the WhatsApp messaging we would use in our bank. I suppose I would categorize it as whether it's a social media interaction or web chat or messaging, non-voice messaging is absolutely a category that has potential because it's good for the customer and it's good for the bank because particularly what I'd call asynchronous messaging like a WhatsApp that you can tap in and go back and forth through the day. That's to us just a much better technology than web chat, as we know, when you leave the browser and so on. But so I think as a category, we definitely see that, and we have targets again to try and grow that. Because unless you have a target, we don't really know where we're going, but we know we want to grow it, and we use the CES as the guide. It has very good CES. In fairness, web chat as well. So we know the customers like it. We know it scales better than the voice interaction. The challenge for it, I suppose, is that there's certainly there's a preoccupation of always the contact center and voice being the key, and did I save a voice call, and trying to prove that can sometimes be hard because the whole thing is growing, and as digital grows, I think the contact center and on voice, so that is a challenge. And I think the trust bit, it's good and it's really good up to a point, but at what point would I call that one of my channels? Like I said at the start, It's hard to know, but it's absolutely it's too important. We all know when WhatsApp went out there a month or two ago, it was like, what happens? I can't talk to anyone. So it's as important as the phone in that sense. And we definitely, but we clump it together with all the other non-voice engagements and look at the like I said at the start, the measurements of the CES and so on to see where would we put it. But we do back to put pods of people together and go, well, how many interactions are they getting? What's the CES? And basically, is it knocking out another type of service and using it to grow? Because otherwise, all the business units go, I want to use WhatsApp, and you've a mess. As in you've just another channel without actually knowing what you stop doing.
Also having full control of the data. It's somebody else's app, so that's always a big issue. It always has been.
Well, the trust element as well. I mean, in our own bank, we would have last year 10 to 20 sites at one point were not our website of a day. So there's a trust element of at what point. Exactly, through WhatsApp, you'll only do a certain amount at the customer level. We know, for example, even in our own measurements, that customers are three times more likely per 100 visits to click into a web chat than a WhatsApp. So I find that odd, but that's a fact. So they do like it. They have a certain reticence about using WhatsApp versus a web chat, as an example.
Yeah. We're a distrustful lot, aren't we? What about e-commerce, social media, and things like embedded finance? How do we start to bring those things in to these daily operations with customers?
Well, as Chris mentioned many times earlier, people don't find financial services fun, engaging. They're either scared by it or worried or just don't understand it. So moving financial services products and services to become more invisible to the customer makes sense. And the trend of embedded finance and the growth of buy now, pay later over the last couple of years has really shown that. You're giving a service to a customer when they want it, of a service that they require at that point. So I think there is going to be more of a trend in that, and we're having actually more conversations as well where there might be a bank a retailer and us, where we bring the technology, the bank brings know-how about loans and credit analysis and also KYC. Because if the retailer is engaging in financial products, there's regulatory obligations to adhere to, which banks historically have been more experienced at. And so delivering that understanding of the customer to the retailer, and if you can deliver the technology and the loan or the buy now, pay later, then embedding in that journey makes a lot of sense. The customer gets what they want. They don't, when you come to mortgages, I don't think consumers wake up and think, I really want to take a view on interest rates. Do I take a floating rate or a fixed rate? Or, God, I'm just so interested in that mortgage product or that investment product. They want to just own a home. They want to just think about being in their home, sitting next to their fire with their family, and a mortgage or the contents insurance or whatever it may be goes along with that. So embedding it in the journey, I think, is going to be clearly the future of really, really solving the customer's problems when they want to solve it.
What we might do is stress out about those things. And as Neil Greathead from Smart Communications in our last session said, reassurance is very much part of this. Not just insurance where reassurance is important. It's important for all of us as we go forward and to build relationships, very important in that sense. What about zero user interface technologies, Cara, and voice assistants? I mean, there is some kind of user interface, but what do you make of those at the moment, and where are we?
I think voice technology has an interesting role and a lot of potential in banking, because when the points that Chris was making earlier about banking being boring and it being kind of complex, what voice technology does is it's engaging and it's simple. And if you think about the fact that with mobile phones, we're able to allow people to really complete transactions with minutes. With voice technology, you can complete transactions within seconds. And so there's a real simplicity and efficiency that you can gain from using voice technology. And we're starting to see banks start to really play with it across basically a number of different parts of the segments, but also around the world. We're seeing people use it for regular transactions to make payments. We're seeing it for added security. We're also seeing some banks make really bold moves. In the US, there's a bank called US Bank who's said that they want to be a voice-first proposition. So they're starting to really think about, how do you get into this? And I think it's really starting to become a little bit more attractive to customers as well, because what we've seen, if you think about your Alexas and your Siris of the world, 2 out of 5 adults use voice assistants every day. And 25% of people from the age 16 to 24 use it every day. So people are starting to really develop a comfort with using voice assistants. But I think in bankings, we haven't seen it pick up more, because there's still a few areas that we need to better understand too as banking, especially around regulations and standards. The standards around this are very immature. And so it becomes a little bit complex for banks to say, am I willing to take a gamble on this in a way that might potentially hurt us down the line?
There are many things, but there are two things that come to mind for me as well, which is the complexity of your interaction. Obviously, it may be difficult to do that using voice, unless you have notes in front of you as a customer. But they do have, it is a nature of biometrics that perhaps they'll give you access. And if you've got that iceberg of data behind, well, then you've got access to potentially a good interaction there. What do you think, Mike, in terms of the use of voice technology and so on in banking? Do you think we're all heading in that direction, or is it going to be a suck it and see and just choose your favourite?
So I do agree with Cara. It is coming. There's no question it's coming. When you started in the past, people went to a branch and then they were comfortable with internet banking, and now people are very comfortable making payments on their mobile, and they do use Alexa. They might be for a shopping list or simple tasks, not more complicated tasks related to banking. So I do think it's coming. We're definitely not there yet. There was an interesting project I was involved in a few years ago with giving Alexa type instruments to people over the age of 80. You think, well, I'm not sure that is the target market that people think about Alexa, but and it was around loneliness and trying to communicate with these people, and it was an incredibly successful pilot. And by the end, when the people came to collect these Alexa instruments,
to wrestle them off,
they did. They literally did. They were in tears, holding on to them, just thinking, this has really helped me. This has solved my loneliness. It's told me jokes. It's played me music. It's done all the things that I wanted. And that was really solving a customer problem. So if we're solving a customer problem and thinking about people using voice more, banks need to get more comfortable, as Cara said, with the regulation and the understanding of those things versus making a shopping list. But I do think it's coming, and that example just shows you when you get it right, it really does hit the nail on the head.
Mark?
Yeah, sorry, for me it's just, I think it's interesting, it's got potential. I don't think it's gone as quick as even the likes of Google thought voice search and that would take on. Yeah. The trust element definitely is, I'm not clear, we expect the threat landscape is getting, harder for banks. So when I think how much time and effort goes in on things like digital certs and what your domain is and the trusted domain, I'm just not clear what that is so it's back to as a day-to-day channel owner, going back to the kind of, well, what are we doing here? It depends if it's on, if you have capacity and budget investment to go into what next, but it really comes back to where you are in the market. Are you an innovator or are you a follower? Because the problem, as we know, is there's 101 digital good stuff we could do, but how do you ratchet that and how do you prioritize? So it's interesting as a service layer, I think, for a channel. As you said, it's convenient, but I think it's a good bit away in terms of making that trusted. I don't know how it becomes a trusted device or trusted channel, even versus the WhatsApp. In fairness, people do trust, I think, that encryption layer. So that kind of equivalent is just an open question.
We'll finish in a few minutes. I'm going to get a left-hand, right-hand poll answer. If you were here with our last session, you'll know left hand means one thing, right hand means the other. How many of you with left hand believe that invisible customer experience is the only way forward? How many with the right hand think that there's something else that's far more important to get right first? Left hand for invisible, right hand more important. I see a more important. Any others? So lots of more importance. Yes, generally. I can't see a left hand. If you have a left hand up, please wave it. No waving. So yes, invisible CX is part of the picture, but not the whole picture. Cara, what do you think in terms of that? How important is invisible customer experience, or how important is it to be the helping hand that everyone knows they can go to?
I think it's really important that I think banks see themselves as being a helping hand. We have a real right to help people with their finances day to day. So I think from taking that perspective that we have an obligation to help our customers with their financial needs, it's really important that we take a service mentality to how we help and support our customers' day-to-day experiences. So I think we really have to lead with the perspective that the experience that we provide to our customers is not only important to them, but it's also one of the things that's really starting to differentiate banks. And we're seeing that with a lot of the numbers and the new banks that are coming up and who's being successful. You have to consciously know and understand that customer experience is going to be something that differentiates your service in the way that we work with our customers. So I think it's quite important for us in banking to really make sure that we're visible and consciously considering the experience that we're providing for our customers.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike, as well, in terms of the use of technologies to get us where we're going? I suppose, invisible CX is part of that. Anything else that you think we really have to look at right now to make whatever we are doing with our data much more effective? Key things right now.
Well, the decisions that people are making are important. Yeah. You need to have savings to fix a boiler if it breaks and save for your future and your pensions. And there's a number of things that it's important that banks and financial services companies have to deliver. So understanding the customer, really getting to the crux of the data, being able to use that and deliver those solutions that people need. They don't know what solutions they need. They just know their problem. And so you can't ask people, what do you want, solution A or solution B? They don't know. All they know is what problem they have when they have it. Yeah. And if you can surface that and you can give them a solution to that problem, then it will be equivalent to non-financial services companies like Deliveroo that were mentioned.
Absolutely. Mark, that's true, isn't it? Also, just a quick thing about the fragmentation that might happen if we don't join them up logically. That you really have to keep your eye on the ball on that score as well, don't you?
Yeah, but look, I go back to the basics of your product channel plan, like for each of in your organizations. If you have 5 or 6 products, what's your channel mix? Where are you originating, or where are you onboarding those customers? Where do you expect to service them? Because that informs where you're going to invest your FTE or your plan or your budget. So I think sometimes those basics, in amongst all the haze of technology, sometimes is forgotten. And treating digital customers as we're going to do everything in the app or we're going to do everything there. I think having that grid view of, as we're coming up to 22, where do you expect your current account, your deposits, your loans, your mortgages to happen. And then if it's what non-voice messaging are you expecting in each of those channels, and what's a logical target, even if you don't know what it is, giving it that lens just helps to shape your activity, because I think that sometimes that first principle isn't as rigorous as it needs to be.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much. If you said a question during our time together so far, we've got some questions coming through. If you're in the app, please do send us another question. We'd love to hear from you. We'll try and quick fire through a few of these questions. First of all, okay, to anybody who fancies answering it, if you can't, I'll see the look of horror on your face. Which upcoming technology trends do you see having the most potential in the future? Let's call it the near future. Cara, I'll throw it to you. Difficult question for you, first of all. Which particular trends do you think are very exciting?
Ooh, I think we started talking about a number of them already.
Yeah. Voice is obviously very interesting.
I think oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, please. Anything else?
No, I was going to say, I do think voice is really interesting, both because of the ease, the ability to add new security, and the ability to also drive accessibility. I actually think that I would probably go back to the basics, and I'm going to go the opposite way on this question. I think we need to do a lot more in terms of making sure that what we're delivering to customers is easy and intuitive with the capabilities that we have.
Yeah.
I think there's a real need to make sure that whilst there's new things that are really attractive, and Mark was saying this earlier, that we need to be building into our repertoire, we also need to make sure the stuff that we have, how are we making it sure that it's really geared towards our customers and it's intuitive for them. So I think there's a lot of focus on driving ease and simplicity into banking, and I think that's probably the sexy new trend.
Yeah. Sexy new trends, Mark.
Well, I think that, look, the data and I think Chris mentioned around the financial insights that Monzo telling you what's relevant or interesting for you, or even things like payments coming up, or if you continue to this, I think that will keep people engaged to your channel. Because for us, the biggest risk is people stop coming to your channel, I suppose, because that's people left branches, they go to your app, but when they're not in your digital estate, that's a problem. So I suppose I think that using that data source around your financial well-being in a way that's done well, that's the key. How do you make it nice?
Mike, you're one of those people who does wake up in the morning thinking of financial services and getting very excited.
Unfortunately, I'm that sad. Yeah.
So what for you is on the horizon that you think, well, even if it's not a new tech, it could be some new way of applying it?
I'm going to come up with a more controversial one, and that is distributed finance and crypto and blockchain, etc. Right. And I do think there is going to be a parallel stream where there's everything that we've been discussing, where we've got big tech and fintechs, and we've got an ecosystem and a technology stack, etc. And I think there's going to be a parallel path where community is going to matter, and thinking about different ways of interacting with financial services that doesn't involve a bank, doesn't involve a government, doesn't involve a central bank. Yeah. And I think those two will merge over time, and I think there are some different efficiencies and different things that play to people's desires around community that is going to change things. And it is a complex area, but I do think that will be more integrated in people's lives as we go on in the coming years. It's not going to be a short-term thing in the next year, but if we look forward in 5 years' time, I think that it's going to look quite different.
We started off talking about Opti and Omnichannel and the move. We've moved up the alphabet. I'm not sure we've moved. At least it's got us here. Another question about fragmentation, which we'll try and answer. We've already done some of that. Here we go. Where is it? It's gone somewhere. Well, okay. Yeah. What's the main hurdle when it comes to creating seamless CX as the digital ecosystem gets more complex? Where do things fall down? Where are the common places that digital customer experience fall down? I'll throw it to either Cara or Mark. Who fancies that most of all? Mark, go on then.
Well, look, I think that the challenge we all have is there's such a rush to go headlong into digitize this, the clutter of activity leads people to not enough time is spent probably thinking and developing and what we need to do, because it's generally a real imperative to get everything released quickly. So I think, and also probably the omni-channel message of having everything available everywhere and allowing customers hop seamlessly is great, but I think maybe purposely limiting your channel in the right way is good. So we definitely had had a think about that and stopped offering things everywhere, because it just became a bit. But there was that thing in the market, I suppose, of even in your app, having everything available in your app that's on your portal. And even if I look at the likes of Airbnb, for certain things, I just can't do it on my app. You do it on their web estate. So I think there's important to have the confidence, I suppose, to have that channel authority and go, okay, on this, for this sound logic, I'm going to limit where somebody might service or where a sale, and don't feel the need to have to do everything everywhere. I think that's important kind of maturity level to try and have that confidence if the data holds up, as in not just doing it because it suits you, not to offer it.
Exactly. We've talked quite a lot about channels for retail customers, and inevitably we'll go down that route, particularly on the mass side of things. But question here, do the same rules apply for engaging with commercial customers, especially when handling more complex commercial products? It's a principle thing, really. It's a yes and a no at the same time. I'll throw it to Cara first, or then maybe to Mike as well, just for a few thoughts. Cara, what do you think in terms of the difference? Because relationship is so key, and personal relationships is perhaps more key than with retail customers in some ways.
I think that's a great point. So having worked in both retail and commercial banks, a lot of the principles are the same. And we need to make sure that digital is easy, intuitive. We need to make sure that the human support is at the right point in time and is really able to support our customers in the right way. But there is a greater dependency on human support in commercial banking. And I think it is partly because we have very complex products, both because of the products themselves, because of the industries we work in, the regulations, et cetera. So it has a technical expertise that's required of humans in commercial banking too. That's really important to make sure that we nail. So I think it is just more of a different balance in the way we think about where the priorities are in commercial banking from across the channels. But with that said, digital is critical. It's a real key focus for us to get right. But we also know that when folks pick up the phone to call a customer or to speak to somebody, they have an even higher expectation of what that's going to be. And I think that's true with both.
Any thoughts, Mike, as well?
The answer I'm going to give now is actually going to give to the last question, so that's interesting.
Okay.
So, if you think about the SME end of that, or in the personal banking, there's lots of digital journeys that do work today. If you want to open an account at Monzo or a simple SME account at HSBC, there is digital onboarding, and it works quite well versus where it was 5 years ago. If you add some complexity in there, if you have 3 directors in that company and one of them is a corporate entity, it doesn't work. So, and the whole market struggles with that. So the easy things have been digitized, the more complex things have not. And then if you go into commercial banking, the lead times are longer. So an SME might need a loan in 2 weeks because they're running out of money. A larger commercial organization often doesn't need a loan in 2 weeks because they've planned it and it's actually in 3 months. So the need for a very quick digital journey is not quite as pronounced there. So I think it works at the simple end, but when we're now really getting into more complex problems, the digital solutions are not there, and that's really where we're trying to work on some solutions.
A final thing, we've got a couple of minutes, back to something that Chris was talking about earlier on, which is transactions enrichment, the actual added value in some ways in what you're doing with your customers. This is back to retail in many ways. Talking about data, where are you at the moment with transactions enrichment? I'll throw it to Mark. How important is the extra value, do you think?
I think, look, everyone can see the potential in it, but the data challenge of even things like the foundational single view of customer that everyone wants and sees, and being able to get that right, and getting your data warehouse function, because I think a lot of the data is there in banks, but extracting it out into the channels is a challenge, but it's a priority. Because I think we know the potential of it, but I don't think many banks are there. But it's kind of frustrating for everyone because we should be. We have such rich information about our customers that other competitors would love to have. But I think it's a known challenge. But we haven't cracked it yet. Frankly, it is a challenge. But I think we have a clear roadmap of trying to fix it.
Final thing, Michael. We'll finish in a second. Is to be able to. Is very, very important, but to target it correctly is also very important. We heard with First Direct from Chris that the customers who are younger, on average, kind of like that part of the service. That's what brings them in some ways. Whereas for many of us, it's getting things done. So I guess as long as you are very aware of what your customers are looking for and looking for next, then you're in the right ballpark. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, it is really about, as we've said a number of times, using the data, understanding the customer, thinking what is it they're trying to achieve. And a WhatsApp message might interact well with one time. A great onboarding journey for an SME might work, but at some point they might want to speak to someone. They might not want to speak to someone. The younger people typically don't. They're happier to open an account on their mobile, interact. But older people, they are happy to interact with the mobile and make payments and other things. But if it was an investment service and they had to open it on their mobile phone, they typically don't want to do that. So it is really thinking about the type of customer and what is it that they want, and try and have the technology that you need to deliver that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, stay with us for a second. Thank you very much to Mike, to Cara, to Mark. Thanks very much for being with us. Stay with us for a second. Thanks very much. Let's bring back Peter, who is live from Chiswick. Peter, are you with us? There you go. Peter, what did you make of our conversation there?
Hi there. I really enjoyed that. I like that narrative of going from Omni to Opti. I think there are some real insights coming out that, on the one hand, what do we need to understand about a customer's needs and tensions in that particular moment to surface the right channel and experience to them. And I think that's really, really critical. I also think that there's a real need to manage the risk that channels don't just become another code word for another siloed set of features and capabilities and data that we can't make use of, that add to an already complex legacy challenge that we have. I do think, though, there's also some optimism in the conversation that was happening towards the end, which is that we can choose the ways in which we inform customers they can engage with us, and we can take advantage of dynamic changes in human behavior as new and different ways of using technology emerge. And I also think maybe, we've spent maybe the last 20 years digitizing existing processes and services and products from a kind of user and customer-centered mindset. And I think we're kicking out now on a more human and purpose-centered mindset. We're hearing terms like financial well-being. We're hearing getting into the real needs of customers. And we're also hearing that not all products and services are equal. I mean, Cara talking about commercial banking and the complexity inherent within that means there's a different mix of how you're going to engage with that customer. And finally, I thought just an emerging additional sense of complexity between that kind of fast and slow money, where in the fast money, we're focusing more deeply in on a transaction and trying to get the behaviors and experiences right with that transaction. Whereas in that more kind of slow money environment, we're thinking over a longer term set of relationships and activities that are driving towards maybe a more meaningful and bigger impact for the individual. That could be improving the financial well-being, getting out of debt. It could be buying a home. It could just be the ongoing planning that one goes through. So I think that's, leaves me with a lot of optimism. And I think there's a lot of benefit coming out of that. And I think, coming out of listening to COP26 and where we're focusing on sustainability, even though that didn't come up in the panel's conversation, again, I think that shift towards a human and a human-centered and purpose-centered kind of approach to how we go about solving these problems is going to become even more.
Yeah, as customers, though, we're a selfish lot, so we end up sort of retracting back into what we normally do. That's always the issue, but at least that's measurable, I guess. What about one point that we made, and Mark talked about WhatsApp and the idea that certain messaging systems, or and Mike talked about others as well, where you can interact through social media and stuff. Look, what do you feel about that? About being where the customer is, but then potentially sacrificing some of the data that you get out of the back of it?
Sorry, is that to me?
Yeah, to you, Peter. Yeah. What do you think about it's very important to be where the customer is, clearly, otherwise you won't engage them, but then perhaps you may sacrifice some of that intricate data that you want to get out of the relationship.
Well, I think right now we're sacrificing almost all of that data anyway. And I think being able to understand what information I need to know about you to make that moment very immersive around what you're trying to achieve is really, really critical. And I think part of the mechanisms that we use to do that, understanding customers better, the research and engagement around that, the design and engineering tools we use to model those types of behaviors, either the data that we have or how we want to collect it. I think we really need to get specific, in terms of the behaviors we want to create for customers, the behaviors we want to help them improve. Because then we can really start to think about what are the collective data points I require to understand and influence that particular moment in time, help them make a better choice or decision, surface a different channel, surface a different product. I would argue we probably collect a lot more data on customers than we're ever going to be able to use. But I do think, and I know we have an open banking panel coming up later, I think part of the real opportunity coming at us is to create not only customer segments, but data profiles around those segments. What are the behavioral data points that I need within a particular segment, within a particular behavioral context, to kind of get the result I'm looking for? To choose this product over that product, to understand their need better, to create a better decisioning experience, for example.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'll throw it around the panel just one more time. So, Mark, in terms of that profiling, is that our next step? Is that what we really have to start doing?
I was just going to say on the WhatsApp point that when we launched that service, we thought we would need WhatsApp banking and we'd need the login ID, and but actually it turned 80% or so of the engagements didn't require that. So I suppose we had over kind of analysed of needing that login, which increased the consideration because of the channel that you're in. But I suppose again, it just showed that they're definitely useful, and it can be very useful even in a equivalent of a public website way to manage service for customers. So you don't need to. I think there's definitely borderlines with any of these tools, because ultimately you have to come back to the foundation of your relationship is that trust, and you own that trust and security element. So there's this always this kind of trade-off that you have to be careful and kind of be considerate of what you do.
It shouldn't be a trade-off, but it inevitably is. Yeah. And so, Cara, what should we look in terms of what we're doing now with our channel strategy? What do you think would be very, 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 very constructive right now to do, first of all?
Gosh, I think there's probably a few things quite constructively. I think we need to make sure that we really understand the activities that our customers want to achieve in each of them. So again, I know it's really basic, but we really just need to make sure we understand where do our customers want to complete these activities, and then figure out if we know this is where they want to behave, then what do we have to do to make sure the intersection between them, so as we were saying earlier, so that we can move between the channels as they want to and as they need to, that capability is in place. Yeah. So I think there's just some real important basics around just understanding the purpose and just stitching things together so that we don't push customers out of channels, that we are supporting them and helping them be where they need to.
So purpose, Mike, and also a lot of glue to bring together the individual elements of this process.
Yeah, I'll touch on purpose quickly. You mentioned sustainability, which we didn't mention. I do think that's going to be an important trend in the product, and I think there'll be pricing for a mortgage based on a green product and whatever it may be, and that will drive some differences of how people interact and think about it. But then when we get to the channels and thinking about trying to do the more difficult things better, once we've got them in the channel and this Optichannel, and we've said this is the best channel for this person at this time, but how do we make that ongoing experience better? How do we bring that automation? It's not just the onboarding. How do we continue down everything that needs to be done so that we haven't only found the channel, but we've really helped them to stay in that channel and deliver what needs to be done?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much to Peter, as always, for jumping in as our pundit today. Great to have you with us in our first session. Thanks to Mark, thanks to Cara, thanks to Mike, and thanks to you all for being part of it today as well. That's great.
Do you want to dance?